Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the U.S. mission to ASEAN for a very special program. I'm your host, Jason Seymour, and I am the spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. We wanted to do tonight's program because we understand how important the issue is of gender-based violence. This program is meant to honor the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, a time of the year when people from all over the world gather to have a conversation about this very important topic. We'll all be wearing some orange for you tonight, and we have orange in the background. The color orange is the official color of these 16 days. And so perhaps if you are concerned about this issue, you'll wear an orange ribbon or some piece of orange in your outfit, and people might ask, why are you wearing orange? And then that'll give you an opportunity to talk about gender-based violence. So as we all know, there are many, many forms of violence that occur throughout the world. Some violence is related to biological sex and hormones and physiology and anatomy. Sometimes alterations are made to people's bodies. Those are all elements of biological-based violence or sex-based violence. We'll talk about that some tonight, but we really want to discuss the issue of gender-based violence. And this is an issue where violence occurs because of expectations of behavior, ways that men and women are trained to behave in the world, and the ways that we should be discussing as a global community, how to change our perceptions of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, how to comport ourselves together. There's so many, many different topics we could discuss about sex-based violence and gender-based violence. We're just going to scratch the surface for you tonight, but I do have some very, very special guests. We have a poet who's going to perform for us a little later in the program. Her poetry moves my soul, so I definitely wanted her to be part of our very special program tonight. And I also have two very, very active women who are contributing to this conversation and have so much to tell us. And I'm looking forward to their presentations and asking questions and hearing their answers. And I hope you will be engaged as well. We encourage you to write questions or comments in the chat if you're with us for the live show. And of course, if you found this recording later, we encourage and invite you to add your comments below. Perhaps you have a story about gender-based violence that you'd like to share with us. Please be part of the conversation. This isn't a conversation for just one evening. This is an ongoing conversation. But I am going to pause there because we want to start hearing from our wonderful guests. Our first guest is from Indonesia, Mindy Varistiwanda. Please open your screen and welcome to the show.
Hi, Jason. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Mindy from Indonesia, currently as a lawyer and also a co-founder as a sister circle Indonesia, which concerns about educations and accompanying clients to the legal. So I would like to talking tonight about I believe that all of us want to feel safe wherever we are. Even right now, the world seems like unfriendly for all of us, for women, children, and disabilities. For instance, like a place that we call home that should be give us a safe and be loved or to be heard. But sometimes or most of the times that the violence comes from homes. And this is something that we are concerned about too. And when we step out our home and we go to study, school, university, or work, we also easily sometimes get harassment, catcalling, or bullying, and even sexual harassment. I think this is not only our problem. I mean, it's not only about Indonesia, but it happens in the world. So I mean that this moment, since the of violence against gender-based violence, is the great momentum for us to realize that we have the problems. We cannot close our eyes, and we cannot just blame the victim, because there's a some factors why this happened. It's happened is not only about the cultures that seem the sexual and reproductive health right are taboo in especially in Asia or in Indonesia, but also there's a systems, a law enforcement, and many other factors. So from these situations makes me realize that I have to do something. So I try to develop a community and gathering the professional from a lawyer and psychologist. How can that we educate people and talk about this? It's not a taboo, but we have to learn and educate ourselves, especially about sex educations. From this community also bring me to as a YSEALI alumni, and then I also connect to other professional fellowship from Southeast Asia, and also get a learning from the US government. So this is the great challenge and also great opportunity for me. So in other side that I have to face the obstacle, but in other side I also have the bridge to connect to others. So I just feel like I'm not alone to do this. And also I believe that we can use our privilege to spread awareness about this, and in educations, educate ourselves, educate the closest one, and then we can speak up and using our privilege, using our social media, or using our connections, or using that our power to spread about this awareness. Jason, I think that that's from my presentation, little presentations, perhaps that we can have more conversations, or there is questions. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much, Mindy. And we're going to have more time at the end of the show for a longer period of conversation, and we're going to bring all our guests in. But I already have a couple questions for you, if you wouldn't mind, because I always have questions. Right. You mentioned that this is an issue of education. Yeah. However, I imagine a lot of people in the audience are going, or are thinking, people know they shouldn't hit each other, right? Yeah. So they know that basic fact. But I'm sure there are other levels of education and other types of awareness that you're talking about that go beyond just that basic. What's an example of what we need to tell ourselves? What do we need to be telling our daughters, our sons, our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues? What beyond just the basic don't hit each other do we need to say?
Yeah, first that we have to realize no one in this world have right to harassment or do violence to others. And then the second is we have to learn about the basic is about consent. Sometimes people still arguing about what is consent, because there is a belief in religion that consent is related to sins or others. So people always argue about the consent, but when it comes to violence and harassment, people tend to blaming the victims, and then they try to close their eyes, but they don't want to accept that the education is very basic about the human right to respect others, respect to our other bodies. Sometimes people think blame the victim because the victim is provoked, their body is provoked them, but it's totally wrong. The only one that we have to blame or responsible is the perpetrator itself. I think it's a very basic to learn about the content, even to the children's who can touch their body as the consent, like a doctor or their parents, what is the purpose, and then about the how to who can take our picture. I mean, it's very basic, but not many people aware about this. I believe that when we are understanding about basic content itself, it will give us more insights about we cannot do harassments or the violence to others, because it's not their it's not consent at all.
You brought up so many good points there, and I just want to emphasize a couple. One of the things that you said is we tell people not to hit each other. We tell people not to abuse each other. Unfortunately, though, abuse is going to happen.
Yeah.
And the issue of education is, what do we tell our children, our colleagues, our friends, how to behave when they have been hit, when they have been sexually violated, when they have experienced this kind of violence? What is the next step? And as you said, the next step is not to feel guilty that it was the individual's fault. The next step is to reach out to friends, loved ones, and sometimes lawyers such as yourself, Sister Circle, the authorities. It could be different from culture to culture, society to society, who you talk to, but the importance is talk to someone. It happened, deal with it, find someone who can help you.
Yes, that's right, yes. And but the first things is how the victim is strengthening and able to, we have to access what they need. Is there, they need to lawyer or psycholog. I mean, that the priority is the healing the victims first, and then that's the great point that we have to ask the professional, because sometimes people don't know how to seek help, and they went viral and it's turned like a boomerang for them. I mean, it's very important to know how to access help and reach out the right person to understand about this, because sometimes when victims speak up, they are get the blaming because it's your fault because you're sexy or you're you provoke them. So this is that's the great point. We have to find the proper help to them.
Reach out. If anyone in the audience has experienced some form of sex-based violence or gender-based violence, talk about it. Don't just hold it in, because there are people who want to help you. We're coming up soon on our special guest, our poet. I'm so excited to hear our poet perform, but I'm going to ask you one more question. We received a very good question from our audience. Casper Foom is wondering, and I'm going to paraphrase your question a bit, Casper, but there are certain cultures that tell women that whatever your husband says, that's God's will, or your husband is the master of the house. And although Casper mentions he's heard about this being common in Islamic communities, we find this kind of thinking in many different religions, many different cultures. So how do we combat that? How do we confront these cultural beliefs that say that a man can do whatever he wants?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the message actually is not complete yet. We don't know what kind of the husband that we have to follow. I mean, when they come to marriage, which means that it's not only about one person, but two person, but we have to communications first. It's not, I mean, if we're talking about you have to follow me, you have to follow what I say, it's a kind of the selfish, because the word is not only about him, right? So I think this communication, and then we have to send the message clear that we cannot follow all our husband or our religious or other leaders, that they may be wrong too. They may be wrong, so we cannot say that it's totally, I mean, that their voice is not their God voice. So we have to understand that we want to live and feel safe, feel to be loved, to be heard. So we have to send the message clear, but send this message clear. Sometimes people just send the message like you said, like you mentioned before, you have to follow me, but we don't know that what kind of the person we have to follow. So the message must be clear, and we have to understand that.
And I just have to say that every community, every religious community, every country has people with a lot of different opinions. So
Yeah.
there are Christian, Jewish, Islamic leaders, Buddhist leaders who all speak out against domestic violence, domestic abuse. So
Yeah.
if you're in a community where your religious leader is saying your husband's beating you, you just have to take it. Maybe talk to some other religious leaders from your community, because I assure you, you're going to hear some opinions if you do some research. We're going to pause there. We'll have time to talk with you more. We have another couple guests, and I'm so excited.
Yeah.
We're going to pause now for a special presentation. Furry Fitra, please open your screen and say hello to our audience.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Jason. Hi, Mindy. Thank you so much for having me here.
I'm so excited to have you here. I've heard some of your poetry and you move my soul. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to perform for our audience, and then I'll ask you a couple of questions after.
All right. So I think they're going to my video. Okay.
You kissed me, then slowly undressed me. I was fully naked. Then you pushed me into bed. I was crying and shouting, but you kept going. I said, stop, stop, and stopped it. But you kept doing it. You forced me. You sucked something inside of me. I still can feel all the pain in my body. You took something away from me. I don't feel strong enough to deal with everything that you've done. For I believe that it's all my fault. What can I say? I kept my mouth shut. I've been changed. I'm a voice that was never heard. I am the unreported case.
Whew, so powerful, so powerful. Furry,
Thank you.
Please tell us about how you came to write that poem, what inspired you, and then you didn't just write a poem, but you performed that poem. You created a video for YouTube. You really put a lot of your soul into creating something for all of us to be moved by. So please tell us a little more about that creative process.
Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you for showing my video. Thank you so much. And yeah, I wrote that poem a few months ago. It's about a woman that being raped and never get any justice. And what inspired me is that I'm standing up for all the survivors, all the victims, that you don't have to blame be your fault. Yeah, any unreported case, because maybe the survivors are afraid to report, or maybe they have such a big trauma, so that's why they cannot report this case, because I'm so afraid, I'm so full of pain. So yeah, that's what the poetry said.
That's true. There are many unreported cases, unfortunately.
Right.
Women and sometimes men who are afraid to come forward and talk about sexual violations. Now, what inspired you to write this poem? Did you know individuals who had been violated, or did you read stories in newspapers, or what moved you to write this poem?
Well, I read a lot of stories sexual harassment at work university, and the latest news I heard that is happened in university, in the big university that I read a few days back, and it can be and I feel poem.
All right, thank you so much, Furi. I'm just going to ask you one more question, and then we'll
Sure.
have time for more questions at the end. But what would be your hope that, how do you hope people will respond to your poem?
Well, my poems, I hope that, to all the survivors get their justice. Just hope that they are not afraid to report in every case that they've been through, because this is really hard for them. And don't be afraid to report and get your justice.
Absolutely. Every community, every country throughout Southeast Asia and the United States as well has services, has lawyers who want to help, there are good police officers in every country who want to hear your case. So I know it's scary and it's hard to bring forward a case, but justice is possible, but not if you don't speak up. So everyone who has had this experience needs to speak up. And there are so many people who want to hug you, embrace you, and help you to find justice and to find healing. Thank you, Furi. We'll come back to you, but we want to
Thank you so much, Yesa.
Absolutely. We want to shift now to our third speaker. So please join the program. Jarada Feltram comes to us from Thailand.
Thank you, Jason. So my name is Jarada, and I'm a co-founder and program manager for FemNimit. We are a cultural and gender archive with a mission to drive a creative gender dialogue for policy change in Thailand. Our project received funding from YSEALI Seed for the Future this year, and I'm also a project representative for tonight. So before we start off, I'd like to give you all a short introduction to our work, why gender data matters in fighting against all forms of gender-based violence, and some practical resources in dealing with gender-based violence for our audience. So to give you the context, there's not enough gender data in Thailand. And what I mean by this is, although there's some data available, such as reports from the UN or the World Bank, the data is scattered across the internet, and it's not connected year by year. While in Thailand, there's so little gender data available at all. And even if they do, they're scattered across governmental agencies, and most of the time they're in incomprehensible forms. However, our team has been working with key actors on the ground, and we know that actually local NGOs and CSOs in Thailand, they do collect data. The example would be when Women and Men Progressive Movement Foundation collected the data by manually browsing newspaper for years, just to get a sense of what's going on the ground in terms of sexual and gender-based violence. But again, these local NGOs, they lack capacity to focus on publicizing or systemizing the data, and this is where we come into play. Technical team, would you please share the slide? Thank you. So our project FemNimit is bridging this gap by collecting, systemizing, and communicating the gender data on our virtual platform. What makes us stand out is we treat data as something meaningful, meaning that there are real lives, real lived experience behind these numbers. It could never be just a number, right? So we communicate the data as such by incorporating data visualization and storytelling techniques to our platform as well. And now you might be wondering, why is this important? Well, first of all, without gender data, there wouldn't be any basic foundation or the first necessary building block for any gender development project. And secondly, policies, distribution of resources, and budget allocation would never be 100% effective. Also, it would almost impossible for you to raise public awareness if there's no accurate, coherent data available on gender. It would be also extremely difficult to convince policymakers to make a change if we don't have data to back it up. So it's a bit bold, but it's realistic to claim that our project will solidly accelerate gender development in Thailand by acting as a foundation for gender data. Our first scope of data will focus exclusively on sexual and gender-based violence because it's one of the most pressing issues in the country. Our website will be launched at the end of this month. Again, a shout out to YSEALI Seed Funding and US Mission to ASEAN for the support. I will share you our social media handle in the chat, and in that way, you could keep in touch for us for the website launch. Okay, thank you so much, technical team, for the presentation. Now, back to the top. So the reason why I brought up gender data and gender knowledge is because it's necessary in fighting against all forms of gender-based violence from both an individual level and a public level. What I mean by this is, as an individual, if you or someone you know experience gender-based violence, gender data and gender knowledge, such as what we will provide on our website, will allow you to understand what to do, where to go, who to contact, or even just like what Nandy say, what even is gender-based violence at all. Apart from that, if you want to get involved with your community in tackling gender issues, gender data and gender knowledge will allow you to understand the severity of the issues, the common misconceptions, or how cultural norms perpetuate the gender violence, and how gender-based violence issues interact with other social issues, such as poverty, homelessness, the lack of healthcare, the lack of education. So this will help you work on your activism with impact and sustainability. However, as an individual, there's so much you could do, but still it would be very hard to tap into the core of the issue. And this is where gender data would become a necessary tool against gender-based violence on a public level. To put it simply, gender-based violence, including domestic violence, is never a personal problem. It is a public problem. It happens and it perpetuates on a larger scale through cultural norms, juridical systems, institutions, ideologies. And the only way to tackle this on a structural level is through policy change, such as more budget allocation from the government for more gender programs, more education on the issues, more funding that would go into gender research, or a fair and trustworthy trial process that is sensitive and not dehumanizing to survivors in a way that would encourage them to speak up, just like Furi said. So all this wouldn't be possible if you don't have data to work on. So to finish this off, I'd like to share some resources in Thailand. If you or someone you know experience gender-based violence, please contact them. They'll give you the guidance and resources you need. I took this website from Thai Consent. They are one of our allies as well. So a big shout out to them for working aggressively on gender issue in Thailand, just like us. And I'm aware that we have audience from around the world, especially in Southeast Asia. And the reason why I'm sharing the resources for Thailand is because different countries, they do have different pain points they need to be addressed, and also different available resources in gender. So there wouldn't be one solution that fits all across the region. However, in terms of activism, I believe that our project is extremely adaptable and expandable. So if any inspired activist or interested organization is listening and would like to get involved with us in any ways, maybe wanting to use our model in your country or contribute to our scope of data, please feel free to say hi to us. I will send the email in the chat as well. We'll be happy to discuss and to collaborate for tackling sexual and gender-based violence together. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gerada. What an excellent presentation. And I agree with you. Usually, if we want to make a policy change, legislators, parliamentarians, they want to see data. They want to see the facts. How are you going, could you describe a little more how you're going to accumulate the facts? Are you hoping that individuals find your site and then provide you with their personal stories? Or are there other elements to how you will collect this data?
So we collect data in two ways. First of all is we have a team that would gather existing resources online, including reaching out to key actors and stakeholders on the ground, and also on the website, reports on the website as well. And you mentioned a very great point, which is something that our project has been thinking of expanding, which is for survivors to submit their story to our platform as well. But there's still a problem in a way that, okay, we have to make sure that the survivor would be very safe. Everything has to be anonymous. And also we have to make sure that it wouldn't be triggering to anyone. The whole process has to be sensitive to the survivor as well. So it's a lot of work. We haven't figured that out, but it's always on our mind on that. So,
always on your mind. Well, it's a process. What do you think of I think you've already answered this question to a degree, but I'll give you the opportunity to expand a bit. What are the main reasons that prevent women primarily from coming forward, from going to the authorities, from sharing their stories? What are the barriers?
Oh, that's a really big question, and I think you and I would have to, spare another hour just for discussing about this. But
It's a long topic. Sorry, to try to shorten it in a couple of minutes.
one of the thing would be the lack of trust for the juridical process, the lack of trust with the institution, which is rightfully so. They haven't been doing anything that's trustworthy. Also, one of the other thing is the cultural norm, the belief in our culture, especially in Southeast Asia, that what happens in the family stays inside the family. You don't want to break a family apart. So it's more like an Asian mentality of a collective culture that, oh, we have to live in the society harmoniously. So you don't want to come out, and you don't want to, cause any trouble, right? And also on top of that, I feel like this is one thing that really hit me the most is not many people were aware that what they experienced was a violence. So there's that as well.
Oh, that's very interesting. So you're saying that in a relationship, there's some people expect some violence, abuse, harassment to be a natural part of a relationship because either they've been told that or they've had poor role models. Oh, that's really interesting.
That could be one way to put it, but another way to put it is they're not aware that that's violence. They thought that's just the way things are, and I think many of them, if you've never had just as you said, a healthy relationship or a place to go, if something happened to you, then you stick to the relationship.
That's fascinating. I have a follow-up question, but why don't we let our other participants join the conversation, and I'll ask a question to all three of you. So Furry, Mindy, if you'd like to join us again.
Sure.
Sure.
So yeah, turn on your screens and then we can all see each other. Very good. So my question is about entertainment in your individual countries. I'm not as familiar with the Southeast Asian media landscape as I am from the United States. When people watch television, are they seeing positive messages about how to handle domestic violence? Are they observing functional relationships? Because for many people, especially children, they have two role models. They have their family, and then they have what they see on television in their favorite TV shows or cartoons. What can you tell us about the media landscape and this specific issue in Southeast Asia? Why don't we go to Mindy first?
Well, that's a tough question. Okay, well, we cannot deny that the media and social media took the huge roles, even as for announced news about the victims or any educations. But the problem since ASEAN is not only about the media, but how we use the media. Sometimes that people don't understand about the content itself. If I make an example, sometimes that we don't want our picture to spread in social media, but maybe our partner, they still posting our picture. So I think this is about it's not about the media that we can't blame, but how we use the media. Is it for useful purposings, or is like a knife? I mean, media can see as the side of knife. Sometimes it can kill you, but sometimes it can help you to make food or something. So sometimes, but people in Indonesia, mostly that I've seen, especially the parents, give the full power to their children to using media without proper education, which one you have to see or which one's not, or they don't know how to setting for the children's safety. So I think it's a huge work that we cannot only blame the media, but also we have to prepare ourselves, our children, or our the futures, that we have to equip them with the proper educations.
you're right. We can't only blame the media. We all have a responsibility, and our communities are a collective of all kinds of messages from different places. But it is interesting to discuss what is going on in the media landscape. And Furry, I'm interested what you're seeing as a poet, as an artist. Do you think Southeast Asian artists are feeling more comfortable talking about this issue, or is it still a taboo topic?
Well, in my opinion, Jason, like I agree with Mindy. Social media has really big impact to all children, to everyone. Like, who doesn't have social media in this stage, right? And if foreign, like for poet, and for me, like this kind of thing is very still taboo in my opinion, very taboo and very raw, and not many people talk about this. So yeah,
that's disappointing. We need to encourage people
right.
to have programs like this one where we talk about this topic. Gerada, what do you think we could do to encourage more people to share their stories, whether it's on a social media platform or in film? What do you think? Well, first of all, what is the landscape in Thailand? What have you seen there?
So in terms of the traditional media, like television, it's really bad. It's been Thai media, Thai soap opera has been infamous for perpetuating rape culture and victim blaming. So we have this saying in Thai, super famous, เลี้ยงเมียด้วยลำแข้ง which is basically raising your wife using your shin. So basically you kick your wife.
Wow.
It's really bad. So in terms of the traditional media, the landscape is just really messy. In terms of encouraging people to come forward, I would say that the first thing is to, remove the stigma or the taboo around it, maybe normalize it. I'm not saying normalize the gender-based violence, of course, and you normalize the act of coming out, you speak up about your experience. But then again, I see the reason why many survivors would prefer to be quiet. So I see that point as well.
Yeah, it takes people being courageous and coming forward, but also what you were mentioning, the policies have to be in place, and there has to be trust, as you mentioned. So particularly women who come forward need to feel that they won't be shamed, they won't lose their families, they'll be able to see some form of legal justice. So there's a lot of work to be done, but is there room to be optimistic? Are you seeing any positive trends? I realize that all of you are acknowledging that there's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm curious if you see any, what we call in English, silver linings or pathways to success, something for us to be hopeful about, but also to build on. And I'll go to Mindy. You're nodding your head. What are some positive signs that things are getting better?
Well, besides that, there is a huge obstacle that we face, but I believe there is a lot of people still have empathy, and then they can using their privilege to spread awareness about this. For instance, that maybe people who watching us right now, I mean, it's great movement that there is a lot of people still concerned and aware about this. So besides that, in Indonesia, even though that we don't have sexual harassment regulations, it's not ratified yet, but we have another good news from our Ministry of Education that they have the regulations how to prevent and how to cope with sexual harassment in the university. I believe that what we do right now, maybe we cannot change the world, but we can, if we can ever listen to one victims or one person and can help them, it will be a great achievement, not in great achievement or a great step for us. Maybe we cannot save all the people in this planet, but maybe we can, as the one good listener for the victim, I mean, that's really great step for us. Thank you, Jason.
Mindy, if we were thinking every moment we were going to change the world, solve everyone's problems, we would never do anything, right? We would be paralyzed.
We cannot be weak.
We can't let that stop us. If we can make a difference for a few people, then we've helped humanity to get better, and we should feel that sense of accomplishment. Furi, I wanted to go a little bit more on your background. Have you been writing poetry for a long time?
Well, yeah, I've been writing poetry since last year, so it's just quite new for me. And most of I writing about something really taboo, can be mental health and sexual harassment, and some about love and depression as well. And it's something really raw, and not all people love my poems, but I try my best, just keep it honest and raw. Yeah,
it's very difficult. It's very difficult to whatever passion we have, whether it's an artistic passion or some other kind of project or prose or just public speaking, we're always going to have critics, and you have to push through that. You have to push through that. That's my advice for everyone who wants to succeed something. You're always going to have detractors. You're always going to have people who critique you. You can't let that stop you.
Yeah.
Now you've used your art to try to bring attention to this very important issue, but as you've said, you have received some pushback. So do you have any words of advice or encouragement for other artists who maybe are getting started and they don't want to be too controversial, but they do want to make a difference? What words of advice would you have for them?
Oh, well, to all the artists, if you have a name, you're famous, then maybe try to speak up about something very raw and honest about this one, about sexual harassment or mental illness. That, as I said earlier, as Mindy said also, like social media have really big impact. And I think if you're an artist, if you are famous, you have people to talk. Why don't we try to talk something positively or can change people's mind?
Absolutely, absolutely. Gerarda, one of the things that we've touched on a little bit in terms of if someone is experiencing sexual violence, that she or he should reach out to family members or people that she can trust. But what are the mental health services that are available in Thailand? Are there options for people, either what we sometimes call in the United States rape centers, or we have a lot of mental health counselors and psychologists? What are the options for women in this situation in Thailand? To whom can they turn?
So unfortunately, there have been some organizations working on it, but in terms of mental health support, I would say non-existent. Even physical support itself would be very hard. We have this OSCC, which is stand for One Stop Service Center or something along that line, that would help you if you experience gender-based violence. But on top of that, even at a private hospital or a public hospital, if you go there, they wouldn't want to collect it, even the evidence for you if anything happens. So in terms of the whole landscape, we have so much to work on. But just to respond to your question earlier, I think I'm pretty hopeful for the future, because I've been seeing many activists coming out, many young, inspiring, really sassy women coming out and just do whatever that they have to do, just to make the society better. I've seen many of our allies, and they've been working so aggressively. And on top of that, I think even us here, sitting here, we are hope. So I think the future is bright. It's probably not going to be within one generation, but I'm hopeful.
I'm so happy to hear that. And I agree with you. If the situation is as dire as you're describing, it's going to take people being assertive and sassy, as you said, and really pushing for change. And you and people from Southeast Asia can certainly look at the history of the United States, all the support systems that we have now, the well-established resources of mental health counseling and laws and policies, those didn't exist at the beginning of our country. That took a lot of effort and sweat and tears and energy and push to make changes. But it happens, things get better. So if people work together, so I'm optimistic too. And I hope people like you are really working hard on this issue. And the other thing that I wanted to say is I see a lot of movement with young Southeast Asians to have the conversation about mental health. And that sometimes one's family or one's religious leaders isn't enough, that one needs a well-developed professional who has a lot of training in mental health. I'm wondering what's happening in this field with sexual violence and needed counseling in Indonesia. Mindy, do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, we are talking about how to the victim get the access to help is related to mental health. It's in Indonesia, it's very limited psycholog that concern to this issue, and then it's also we have to pay higher to access their help. Therefore, I try to using my connections, that the friends that I have, how they can, if there's a victims need psycholog, I try to connect them, and it's for free. But it's not on, it's not happen in all Indonesia. So, like Gerarda mentioned before, it's the huge work and the long process that maybe, but I mean that we cannot lose hope as well, because like you mentioned before, Jason, there's many movements, and then many peoples and community have the concerns about this. So I believe that our works, even it's just a little step, but maybe one day and really get the impact from this, probably from the regulations or the like a center for the victims to access help, even from the lawyer or from the psycholog and others that's related to this issue. Actually, we have some organizations from government, but I would say that they're not, they cannot work properly. So this work still handling by non-government organizations. I think, yeah, these are the huge words, but maybe someday or soon that our regulations about this will be ratified in Indonesia.
And I mean, we're kind of going in turns, but anyone could answer this question. And I'm curious culturally as well. When did you first hear as a child someone talking about domestic abuse? Is that something that people talked to you when you were a child, or was it not until you were an adult that you heard these conversations? I'm wondering if you have any insight on that in terms of the culture, the family dynamic. Furry, did you have anything you'd like to say about that?
Well, first thing I heard about sexual harassment is when I was in high school, like many my friends like talking about this is you know, you're still young, you're like 15, 14, and you got pregnant, and it's because she doesn't want to get pregnant because she was being raped, and it's really sad because she has to live in such a big trauma. And that's how I heard about sexual harassment. And I don't know if she got any justice since now, but it's just friend, you know, mess people's lives. I feel sorry for them.
Absolutely. I don't know if any of you want to comment on issues of reproductive health and sexual education. I'm wondering if any of you have an opinion about what what would be the best policy? What age do you think children should be talking about this issue? I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that to share with our audience. Gerarda, would you be willing to comment on that?
Well, I'm not qualified in the field of sexual and reproductive health, so take what I say as a grain of salt. But the first thing that we really have to push forward in Thailand is to legalize abortion. I think recently they legalized just like the first 3 months of a fetus, if I remember correctly. But just that one, focus on that one first. And also free tampons as well, free sanitary napkins, or female healthcare products. Even in prison, they don't have that. So that would be my first take on this.
You would expand access to all kinds of reproductive and sexual, medical assistance, so contraception, abortion services, sanitary napkins. That was something you feel would help this, or would help the women of Thailand.
Or it would help women anywhere. And in fact, I think many countries have been doing this kind of thing, and we're just falling a bit behind. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mindy, did you have any thoughts about that? I don't know the circumstances in Indonesia enough to comment. So what's your feeling about the policies on this specific issue?
Well, I will say that there is no specific policy in Indonesia related to this issue, because there's a pro and cons about these regulations. But we have a little good news from our Ministry of Education that he concerns about this issue. I think that we cannot rely on just one person or one organizations, but this is our work and how the governments and the non-organizations and our community to work together on this issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very complex issue, very complex, and your perspectives are definitely appreciated. There's a lot of topics on, within the elements of sex-based violence and gender-based violence and domestic abuse. And there are additional topics such as sexual harassment in the workplace. There's so many rich challenges in this area, but I'm wondering, so we've all talked about various policies in your countries and what's most important. What would you like the audience to know that we haven't talked about already about the issue of sex-based violence and gender-based violence? What are the issues that we should be talking about that either we haven't already talked about now, or well, let's just go with that, because we've already talked about a lot of issues, but are there additional aspects of those issues or another issue within gender-based violence that we should be talking about? Whoever wants to go first.
I can go first.
Okay.
As I mentioned earlier, I think the topic of gender data hasn't been, widely discussed. And it's often overlooked as well. I even overlooked that before I actually seriously working on gender issues. So, gender data, you could do so many things with it. You could, roll out a more effective policy, maybe effectively allocate more funding to, the place that's needed, to the issues that needed. So yeah, I can't emphasize this enough.
And it's another reason why it's so important for women to come forward when this happens to them, because it's too easy for these issues to be dismissed. Because if our policymakers aren't seeing them, if the legal system isn't seeing them, then it's very difficult to know whether it's a serious issue. We need people to come forward when they go through these tough times. Yeah.
Right. That's a part of data. So for sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'll hand this over to Mindy.
Thank you, Gerarda. I mean, that's a great point too, because in Indonesia is very difficult to access the data, because the data is only collect when you are report to police. And actually, when we're talking about the sexual harassment and violence, it's like an iceberg. What come up in surface is just a little, but under that, it's beyond than beyond that the beyond that case that we've seen in the news. I think that almost every day I receive the news, and then people consultation to me about what happened to them. I mean, that's the great point to besides that, we concerns about how we give the access to the victims, but also how we can collect the data, because in Indonesia we have some problem about the data itself, because the sexual harassment of violence, it's only happen when you are have the intercourse, but it's not accounting when you have get a catcalling or people just touch your body without consent. So it's another problem as well.
And that speaks to what you were talking about earlier, the topic of consent. In the United States, this word is becoming more common in conversations. What does consent mean? And it's sort of a new word. I mean, it's the word's an old word, but in this context, it's been mentioned more and more. And it's a very effective word to use in the United States. This word has moved a lot of people to think differently about romantic relationships, sexual relationships, marital relationships, and for children as well, to hear this word and think about what that means. We're coming to the end of the show, so I want everyone to have a chance to offer one more thought, or say hello to our audience, offer a message to our audience. You're welcome to say a few words in your local language as well, if you'd like. Doesn't only have to be English, but love to hear a closing thought from each of you. Let's start with Gerarda.
Thank you. So you said I could pass on any message to our audience, right?
Sure. You can
Sure.
speak in Thai, sure.
So as I mentioned, our project will be launched by the end of this month, and we're super excited for it. So I'm sharing you all our social media handle in the chat. Please feel free to follow us, say hi to us. We'd be happy to collaborate, or just to send you news and just keep in touch. Thank you.
Fantastic. And we'll go to Mindy.
My message is very short. Educate ourselves and be brave.
Excellent. Oh, brave. I love that word. It's a great word. All right. And Furry, any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, I want to say to all the survivors, maybe all the victims, I want to say like, you are a diamond. You are untouchable diamond. No one gonna change that from anyone. You are still beautiful, and you're just beautiful, and no one gonna change that. Thank you.
I love that. I'm speaking to 3 diamonds tonight. You're all very special, and I really applaud all the energy and effort that you're putting into this very, very important issues. Sometimes I was smiling throughout the hour, and I want to say I wasn't smiling about the topic because this is such a serious topic, but what I was smiling about is the thought that people are coming together, they're working hard on this issue, they're trying to make a difference, we're being there for each other. All of you are making important contributions to this very, very important topic, and that's why I wanted you all to be here tonight. To our audience, thanks so much. Whether you joined us live or you found this video at a future date, if you listen to this conversation, that clearly means that you care about this issue. And that was the main thing that we wanted to experience tonight, a conversation with people who really care about this issue and want to make a difference. So we'll be sure to include contact information and social media information of all of our speakers tonight in our comments, in our description of the video. And I urge you please add your comments, add your organization, add what you're doing to make a difference in the comments below. Let's all work together and make a difference. So thank you again to my participants, and thank you to our audience. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.